The most dangerous lies never sound like lease. They did not fall because they were weak. They did not collapse because they were ignorant. And they were not defeated by enemies at the gates. They fell because they believed they were being wise. History rarely begins with violence. It begins with an idea that sounds reasonable, measured, mature, an idea that promises stability, peace, and moral superiority, and that is precisely why it works. Some of the most destructive beliefs ever embraced were not sold as lies, they were praised as wisdom. Beliefs that encouraged restraint when action was required. Beliefs that glorified patience when urgency was necessary. Beliefs that elevated morality while quietly dismantling power. Civilizations did not always lose their strength through invasion. Many surrendered it voluntarily, through principles that sounded enlightened, human, and intelligent. Because power is rarely stolen by force, it is surrendered through belief. Think of the individuals who once held influence, leaders, thinkers, reformers, who slowly faded into irrelevance. Not because they lacked intelligence, but because they trusted ideas that told them, this is the right way to behave. They believed that goodness would protect them. That truth would eventually be recognized, that avoiding conflict was a sign of higher understanding. That waiting was wiser than acting. Each belief sounded sophisticated, each belief felt safe, and each belief quietly dismantled their ability to shape outcomes. What makes these ideas truly dangerous is not that they are obviously false, but that they feel correct. They reward your self-image. They signal intelligence. They reassure your conscience. And if you are thoughtful, educated, or self-aware, these ideas were designed for you. Because the most effective form of control does not feel like oppression. It feels like wisdom you chose yourself. This is where most people misunderstand power. They imagine it as something external, money, authority, dominance. But power begins much earlier, at a far more subtle level. Power begins with the beliefs you accept without resistance. Beliefs shape behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. And outcomes quietly rewrite your position in the world. Long before someone loses power publicly, they lose it privately, in the ideas they allow to govern their decisions. And this is where a long, misunderstood thinker enters the frame, not as a villain, not as a teacher of cruelty, but as an observer who noticed something others refused to see. Machiavelli lived in a world of collapsing alliances, moral posturing, and political betrayal. He watched noble intentions fail. He watched truth lose to appearance. And he watched men surrender power, not because they were evil, but because they believed they were being virtuous. Machiavelli understood something deeply unsettling, that ideas praised as moral often function as instruments of control, that society rewards obedience disguised as wisdom, and that the most dangerous lies are not shouted. They are whispered in the language of virtue. This is not a story about becoming ruthless. It is a story about becoming aware, because once you see how power is lost, you begin to understand how it is preserved. In this documentary, we will uncover 4 lies, ideas celebrated as signs of intelligence and moral maturity, that have quietly stripped people of their agency for centuries. They are taught in classrooms, repeated in media, shared as advice, and each one sounds wise, but together they form a psychological cage, one that does not need guards, because those inside believe they chose it freely. By the end of this journey, the question will no longer be whether these lies are dangerous. The question will be, which of them have already shaped your life? Machiavelli's core insight, why wisdom can be a trap. Power does not reveal itself in moments of violence. It whispers in corridors. It moves behind closed doors. And it is measured in the choices people make when no one is watching. To understand it, we must return to Florence, a city of beauty, art, and intellectual brilliance, but also a city of betrayal, intrigue, and shifting allegiances. Here lived Machiavelli, a diplomat, bureaucrat, and observer of the human condition. He did not write The Prince as a guide to cruelty, nor as a manual for tyrants. He wrote it as a forensic investigation of power, a study of why societies collapse and why leaders fail, even when they appear moral capable. Machiavelli's realization was unsettling. Societies rarely crumble because people are evil. They crumble because they confuse virtue with safety. Good intentions, moral uprightness, and adherence to tradition, these qualities so often celebrated, can be weaponized. When people trust that morality alone will protect them, they surrender agency to circumstance and to the ambitions of others. In Florence, Machiavelli watched the fragile dance of alliances. Wealthy families rose and fell not because they were cruel, but because they misjudged loyalty, overestimated goodwill, and underestimated the silent strategies of rivals. A subtle betrayal here, a political promise broken there, and slowly power shifted, not through force, but through calculated obedience to socially approved wisdom. Machiavelli began to see a pattern. Ideas that sounded enlightened often reduced conflict, but at a hidden cost. Principles that promised stability frequently punished ambition. Behaviors praised as civilized could neutralize initiative. Wisdom framed as morality could be a leash, subtly constraining thought and action. He realized that those who followed conventional wisdom were not necessarily knave. They were socially rewarded for obedience. They were taught to value what made them predictable. And yet, predictability is the foundation of control. For Machiavelli, the human mind itself became a battlefield, not of swords but of ideas. Virtue was a dangerous illusion. Safety was an invisible trap. And the strongest were often the most easily ensnared. It is here that we begin to see the framework for the 4 lies this documentary will explore. Each one operates under the same principle. It sounds intelligent, rational, and morally correct, while quietly stripping agency. They sound enlightened. The lie convinces you are wise. They reduce conflict. The lie disguises passivity as diplomacy. They promise stability. The lie rewards inaction as prudence. They punish ambition. The lie enforces conformity and obedience. The brilliance of Machiavelli's observation lies in its subtlety. He does not portray these ideas as foolish. He portrays them as invisible forces, socially ingrained and psychologically seductive. By framing virtue as synonymous with security, society teaches people to embrace compliance as wisdom, and compliance, no matter how well-intentioned, is the silent killer of influence. The audience begins to understand these are not failures of intellect. They are failures of perception, failures of understanding how power actually operates. History is filled with examples. Leaders praised for their morality lost wars because they refused to adapt. Advisors celebrated for their loyalty were ignored by those with ambition. Institutions that rewarded patience encouraged inaction, and brilliant minds, convinced of their own insight, became predictable and easily manipulated. Machiavelli's disillusionment was profound. He observed societies punished the ambitious who dared to act independently, while the obedient were celebrated, even when their obedience contributed to the weakening of the state. This realization forms the backbone of our exploration. The 4 lies we will examine are not mistakes. They are socially engineered traps. They reward compliance, discourage initiative, and quietly erode the capacity to act. By the end of this journey, you will understand that these ideas are not theoretical abstractions. They are practical tools, historically effective, and psychologically seductive. You will see that history is not just a story of external battles, but of internal ones. That losing power often begins not with confrontation, but with the unexamined acceptance of what feels safe and intelligent. And, as Machiavelli observed, the truly dangerous ideas are those that sound like wisdom. Cecitioil nie1, good intentions are enough. We like to believe that being good will protect us. That if our hearts are pure, the world will mirror our intentions. That morality alone is armor against harm. It is one of the most comforting lies we tell ourselves, and, as history repeatedly demonstrates, it is one of the deadliest. Consider reformers who sought only justice, only fairness. They came with open hands, ideas of progress, visions of equity. Yet, time and again, their purity became a weapon against them. Their good intentions blinded them to the realities of the systems they sought to change. Their idealism was exploited, manipulated, and ultimately dismantled by those who understood that the world rewards results, not conscience. Leaders in political courts of Europe, entrusted with noble causes, were often betrayed by the very people who claimed to serve the same ideals. Advisors who expected gratitude for loyalty were ignored when ambition demanded deception. Entire movements, built on moral clarity, fell apart because their followers were convinced that righteousness would automatically secure success. Why do humans cling so desperately to intention over outcome? Psychologists argue it is a defense mechanism. To acknowledge failure is painful, but to hold fast to the idea that you meant well preserves your self-image. To believe that goodness shields you from harm reassures your ego. It whispers, you are intelligent, you are moral, you are protected, but the world does not respond to your moral compass. It responds to your actions and their consequences. Machiavelli saw this clearly. His insight was brutal but simple. The world does not reward intent, it rewards results. The ruler who acts out of morality without strategy is as vulnerable as the knave soldier on an open field. Power is neutral to virtue. It is neither impressed nor intimidated by goodness. It simply rewards effectiveness. This belief that intentions suffice disarms people. In negotiations, it leaves one vulnerable to manipulation. In politics, it becomes a pathway for exploitation. In careers and workplaces, it is the silent disadvantage that ensures compliance. Kindness becomes a performance, moral integrity a liability, and visible sincerity an open door for those willing to seize opportunity without scruples. Historical examples abound. Think of rulers who trusted advisors because of their apparent honesty, only to be betrayed. Think of revolutions derailed by the inaction of those convinced that moral authority alone would protect them. Think of alliances broken because parties assumed goodwill would be sufficient to maintain loyalty. Even in the modern world, this lie persists. Social media celebrates virtue signaling as proof of character, rewarding those who project moral righteousness. Activists are lauded for intent, not outcomes. Businesses and institutions favor employees who align with the image of ethical compliance over those who achieve results that challenge comfort zones. The lesson is stark: good intentions without strategy are not protection. They are invitations to be used. They are a map for predators, human or systemic, to identify, exploit, and outmaneuver those who trust in virtue alone. Machiavelli would argue that morality is not inherently dangerous, but morality without strategy is fatal. The heart alone cannot secure influence, and virtue divorced from action is powerless. The path to real power, or even survival, begins not with feeling good, but with acting effectively, with understanding consequences, with recognizing that the world does not reward your conscience, only your capability to shape reality. And it is this uncomfortable truth that sets the stage for the next lie: another belief, another comfort, another idea that sounds wise but quietly erodes the foundations of power. If you're right, you'll eventually be recognized. We like to believe that truth carries its own weight, that logic, evidence, and reason are universal currencies, that if you are correct, the world will eventually see it. It is a comforting idea. It tells us persevere. Be patient. The universe has a moral arc, but history whispers a more unsettling truth. It is not accuracy, but narrative control that shapes outcomes. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. In his view, perception often outweighs reality. The world does not reward the one who is right, it rewards the one who is effective, who tells the story convincingly, who manipulates attention, opinion, and expectation. Consider the inventors whose discoveries were suppressed. Think of whistleblowers whose warnings were ignored, visionaries whose theories were dismissed because they lacked the power to enforce their credibility. Truth alone does not secure influence. Truth without visibility, strategy, and leverage is fragile, ephemeral. Meanwhile, power, divorced from truth, is enduring. Psychology explains why this lie is so seductive. Humans tend to overvalue logic and underestimate influence. We assume rationality guarantees recognition. Cognitive biases reinforce this belief. Authority bias convinces us that the right ideas will eventually be acknowledged. Social proof seduces us into trusting the majority opinion, even when it contradicts facts. But the cruel lesson repeats itself across eras. Galileo Galilei, correct in his heliocentric model, faced years of persecution. Semmelweis, who understood hand-washing prevented countless deaths, was ridiculed and ignored. In the modern age, brilliant scientists, analysts, and creators vanish into algorithmic obscurity because influence often hinges on attention, storytelling, and visibility rather than merit. Being right does not guarantee acknowledgement, it guarantees nothing. For intellectuals, this lie is particularly dangerous. Those who assume logic alone ensures recognition are often blindsided by the structures that govern visibility and influence. They are the thinkers who wait patiently, confident that the world will reward insight, while others exploit narrative, perception, and networked influence to seize opportunity. In workplaces, academia, and politics, truth is often weaponized by those who understand how to bend perception. A well-crafted lie, strategically delivered, can achieve far more than facts ever could. Systems, bureaucracies, institutions, media prioritize usefulness over correctness. Results, appearance, and perception are king. Truth without power is powerless. And here lies the chilling realization: being right without influence makes you irrelevant. Being wrong but strategically positioned makes you powerful. This is not pessimism. It is observation. It is a recognition that reality, however objective it may seem, is filtered through the lens of influence. The lie that truth will eventually prevail is seductive because it absolves action. It allows inaction to masquerade as patience. It allows passivity to masquerade as virtue. Machiavelli would warn, the world does not reward your understanding of reality. It rewards your ability to shape it. And so, silence, in the absence of leverage, is not bad luck. It is predictable. It is the natural consequence of believing that being right is enough. For those who embrace this lie, brilliance becomes invisible, insight becomes powerless, and the world moves forward indifferent, guided not by truth, but by the narratives controlled by those who understand the mechanisms of influence. Truth without power is fragile. Power without truth is durable. And this is a lesson that every thinker, every idealist, every moral actor must confront. Rightness alone will never protect you from irrelevance. Recognition, authority, and impact require more than intellect. They require strategy, visibility, and an understanding of how perception shapes the world. Because in the theater of human affairs, the curtains are not drawn on wrong or right, they are drawn on those who control the stage. Ctn-EV-LN3. Avoid conflict to stay powerful. We live in an era that glorifies harmony, that celebrates patience, compromise, and consensus. We are taught that avoiding confrontation is a mark of intelligence, emotional maturity, and even morality. It is, at first glance, appealing. Who wants enemies? Who wants strife? Who wants disruption? And yet, this belief is not just comforting, it is dangerous. Machiavelli understood this clearly. Conflict avoided is not peace earned. It is power deferred. To avoid disagreement, to step back, to yield in hopes of maintaining stability, is to hand control to others. Every moment of hesitation, every concession made to avoid tension, is a gift to those who act decisively. Psychology helps explain why this lie is so seductive. Humans are conditioned to fear social rejection. From childhood, we are taught that conflict signals failure, aggression, or moral deficiency. Moral signaling reinforces this, framing restraint as virtue. Even adults internalize the idea that a good person avoids dispute, a cognitive shortcut that prioritizes social acceptance over agency. But history offers stark warnings. Consider rulers who, in the name of peace or diplomacy, ignored threats until they became crises. Kings and advisors who sought to appease rivals found their authority quietly undermined. Florence, again, offers an example. Leaders who yielded to political factions in hopes of harmony watched their influence evaporate, while their rivals, willing to confront, seized decisive advantage. Fast forward to the modern era, corporations reward compliance over challenge. Dissent is muted to avoid office conflict. Whistleblowers are punished, not for wrongdoing, but for disrupting comfort. Political actors who remain neutral, unwilling to take sides, often inadvertently empower the aggressors who seize the narrative. Conflict is inevitable. To avoid it is to participate in its management. By default, you empower those who act. Silence is not neutrality. Appeasement is not strength. And yet the world praises restraint. We are told the wise avoid confrontation. We are told patience is virtue. We are told harmony is stability. Machiavelli's insight reframes these ideas. True strength is not aggression, but endurance. It is the willingness to face discomfort, to assert boundaries, to act strategically even when it unsettles others. The courageous act is not the loudest nor the cruelest, but the one that preserves agency. Conflict avoided may feel safe, but it is corrosive. It erodes confidence, diminishes influence, and teaches others that your limits can be crossed without consequence. The lesson is clear: power does not respect restraint. It rewards engagement. It rewards decisiveness. It rewards those willing to bear the social cost of standing firm. Harmony, unchecked, is a cage disguised as virtue, and those who fall for it are not failures of morality. They are victims of misplaced trust in the comfort of consensus. To endure discomfort, to confront opposition thoughtfully, to engage strategically, this is where true influence resides, not in aggression, but in deliberate action, not in domination, but in conscious assertion of boundaries, not in avoiding conflict, but in mastering it. Machiavelli would recognize the pattern immediately. The world punishes inaction cloaked as prudence, and rewards calculated confrontation cloaked as courage. The cost of this lie is silent but profound. It teaches you to defer your own power. It conditions you to surrender agency while praising the illusion of wisdom. And when the time comes to act decisively, those who believe that avoiding conflict preserved them are often too timid to reclaim what was quietly surrendered. Esition v. Lai foi. Patience always pays off. Patience is praised. It is elevated as a virtue. We are told, wait your turn, bide your time, let opportunity come to you. It sounds wise, it feels safe. It is, in fact, the most dangerous lie of all, because waiting can disguise inaction as strategy. And when inaction becomes habit, time becomes an enemy. Consider the countless careers stalled, opportunities missed, and movements delayed by those who trusted that patience alone would deliver results. They waited for recognition. They waited for the right moment. They waited believing that by doing nothing, they were practicing prudence. Machiavelli understood the difference between patience and passivity. Patience is deliberate. It is calculated. It is paired with leverage, insight, and readiness. Passivity, on the other hand, is waiting without agency, a surrender disguised as wisdom. Psychology explains why humans fall for this trap. Delayed action often becomes identity protective avoidance. We tell ourselves, I am waiting strategically, when, in truth, we are avoiding discomfort, risk, or potential failure. Institutions reinforce this behavior. Organizations reward those who comply with timelines that favor hierarchy. Movements delay action because protocol dictates caution. Waiting stabilizes the system, maintains control, and discourages disruption. The consequences are subtle but devastating. Time does not pause. Opportunities do not wait. Influence decays quietly, and power diminishes without notice. Those who rely on patience without action are often the last to recognize that their window has closed. History is littered with examples. Visionaries who waited too long to act, thinking the world would notice their merit, were overtaken by rivals willing to seize opportunity. Rulers who deferred decisions lost control of kingdoms. Movements stalled because participants adhered rigidly to the illusion of strategic patience, while opponents acted decisively. In the modern world, the lie persists. Careers remain stagnant, debates are postponed, and innovations languish because people assume the right time will come, while others shape the moment and claim the rewards. Social media reinforces this by rewarding curated patience. The algorithm favors those who appear measured and deliberate, often at the expense of impact. The emotional core of this lie is regret. The narration lingers on the missed moments, the chances that passed silently, the influence never realized. Watching life's possibilities slip by fosters quiet despair, a subtle erosion of agency, a realization that time itself can be weaponized against inaction. Machiavelli would warn patience only pays when paired with leverage. Waiting without readiness, without insight, without influence is surrender. True patience is active. It is strategic. It is the preparation that precedes decisive action, not the inertia that masks fear. Power decays with time, influence diminishes silently, and the world does not reward those who wait passively, regardless of intention or moral standing. To survive, to lead, to wield influence, one must act, not recklessly, not without forethought, but decisively when readiness meets opportunity. Because the greatest cost of this lie is invisible, the slow erosion of what could have been, the quiet death of potential, and the realization that no amount of patience will restore what has been surrendered to delay. Sati why these lies are still taught. If these lies are so destructive, why are they celebrated? It is a question few dare to ask aloud. The answer is not conspiracy. It is structure. It is predictability. It is the quiet architecture of control. Societies thrive on stability. Institutions, organizations, and hierarchies function best when behavior is predictable. And these four lies, the comforting narratives of morality, truth, conflict avoidance, and patience, do precisely that. They are lessons in compliance disguised as wisdom. Consider the psychology behind it. Humans are wired to seek approval, to avoid discomfort, to value moral alignment. Authority bias and social proof guide behavior. When people see virtue rewarded, they emulate it. When patience is praised, they delay action. When honesty is lauded, they trust that it alone will protect them. And when harmony is idealized, confrontation is avoided. These patterns are invisible, yet they operate relentlessly. They shape decisions without coercion, guiding people toward behaviors that are socially reinforced, institutionally rewarded, and culturally admired. It is coddle. It is chilling. No one has to force obedience. The lessons are taught voluntarily. Parents, schools, workplaces, media, all transmit these ideas as virtues. And those who follow them are celebrated, praised, and trusted. They feel intelligent. They feel moral. They feel safe. Meanwhile, those who challenge these narratives are marked as reckless, aggressive, or immoral. Their ambition is questioned. Their authority is undermined. Their influence is constrained. The system quietly ensures that those willing to accept the lies rise, and those who resist are contained. History confirms it. The obedient rise in bureaucracies. The compliant inherit influence in politics. The cooperative thrive in corporate hierarchies. The patient, harmonious, and well-intentioned are given trust and recognition, often at the cost of agency and power. Even today, the pattern persists. Online platforms reward those who conform to social norms. Institutions elevate those who maintain civility and avoid challenge. Cultural narratives frame passivity and virtue as wisdom, rewarding behavior that reinforces predictability. The effect is profound. A population that believes it acts freely, but whose actions are subtly shaped by the celebration of these lies. The brilliance of this system, if it can be called that, is in its invisibility. No one feels oppressed, no one sees the leash, no one suspects that power has already shifted, and yet the consequences are unmistakable. Influence is ceded, opportunity is missed, agency is eroded. Machiavelli recognized this centuries ago. He did not advocate tyranny. He did not demand rebellion. He simply observed those who understand these mechanisms hold advantage. Those who ignore them, even when morally correct, are quietly constrained by the very virtues they embrace. The viewer is left with a chilling realization: these lies are not random. They are functional. They are socially reinforced. They benefit systems that prize predictability over disruption, and while this knowledge may unsettle, it also empowers. To see the invisible forces shaping behavior is to reclaim choice. To understand why certain ideas are celebrated allows the thinker to decide whether to accept them or resist them strategically. This is not a manifesto. It is a forensic examination, a careful illumination of patterns that operate beneath the surface of morality, logic, and prudence, because the most effective form of control is never shouted. It is quietly taught, normalized, and rewarded, and the consequence of ignoring it is subtle but permanent: the slow erosion of power in those who believe they are acting wisely. The cost of comfort. We began with a question: what wisdom has cost you your power? It is a question that does not demand an answer. It only asks you to look inward, to see where comfort disguised itself as clarity, to see where virtue masked passivity, to see where patience became surrender. Throughout history, the cost has been quiet, almost imperceptible. Kings who trusted advisors' sincerity lost crowns. Movements that waited for the right moment dissolved into irrelevance. Innovators whose truths were ignored faded from memory, all because they believed in the comforting lies of morality, recognition, avoidance, and patience. And yet, the most unsettling aspect is not the external loss, it is the internal one: the erosion of agency, the surrender of discernment, the quiet acceptance of illusions because they felt safe. Power, as Machiavelli understood, is not simply seized. It is preserved. It is exercised with awareness. It is maintained by those willing to face discomfort, question convention, and act decisively. Those who do not, those who cling to comfort, faith in virtue alone, or the promise that truth will inevitably prevail, are left with a haunting emptiness, not because they were defeated by force, but because they gave themselves away, piece by piece, to ideas that seemed wise, yet were quietly corrosive. Reflection is not enough. Awareness is only the beginning. The true cost of these lies is measured in missed opportunity, diminished influence, and the subtle surrender of choice. And in that stillness, in that quiet reckoning, one realizes the final truth. Power is not taken from the unaware. It is surrendered by those who mistake comfort for truth. Let the weight of that realization linger, because understanding is the first step toward reclaiming what was lost. And reclaiming power begins not with conquest, but with the courage to confront the lies we were taught to believe. Cession the path to awareness and strategic power. Power is often misunderstood. It is not cruelty, it is not manipulation, it is not domination. These are the myths that tarnish Machiavelli's name. He is rarely remembered as what he truly was: a forensic analyst of human behavior, a guide to clarity, courage, and conscious action. The four lies we have explored, the seductive comforts of good intentions, inevitable recognition, conflict avoidance, and passive patience, are not failures of morality. They are failures of perception. To navigate the world wisely, one must first see clearly. To reclaim influence, one must act consciously. To survive in complex human systems, one must align internally with reality, rather than with comforting illusions. Power begins within. It begins with understanding that virtue without strategy is vulnerable, that truth without leverage is fragile, that avoidance seeds authority, that patience without action is surrender. This is the clarity Machiavelli sought to illuminate. Power is not earned by passivity or moral purity. It is cultivated through discernment, the ability to read people, systems, and moments accurately. It is exercised through courage, the willingness to act even when the consequences are uncomfortable. And it is maintained through conscious strategy, understanding when to advance, when to wait, and when to resist being messled by lies dressed as wisdom. Strategic power is subtle. It does not roar. It is not measured by fear or force, but by alignment of thought, action, and perception with the underlying realities of influence. History offers countless lessons. Leaders who understood reality, who paired moral insight with strategic clarity, thrived. Those who acted blindly, even with the best intentions, fell. Movements succeeded not by waiting for recognition, but by controlling the narrative. Societies endured not by avoiding conflict, but by navigating it with courage. Opportunities were seized not by passive patience, but by readiness and decisive action. In modern life, the lesson is the same. Influence in careers, activism, relationships, and social systems is secured by those who see clearly, act consciously, and resist the comforting illusions that encourage surrender. This is not a call to cynicism. It is a call to awareness, to think critically, to observe carefully, to act strategically. Machiavelli's true insight lies not in advocating cruelty, but in rescuing agency from the myths that quietly erode it. He teaches us that power is not something taken from others. It is something aligned, cultivated, and defended within oneself. The path forward is deliberate. Recognize the lies we have internalized. Question the comfort of accepted wisdom. Understand that morality, truth, patience, and harmony are tools, effective only when paired with awareness and action. Accept that discomfort is inevitable, and that courage is the bridge between insight and influence. In the end, power is not the absence of morality. It is the mastery of reality. It is the courage to act with clarity. It is the discipline to navigate life without surrendering agency to comforting illusions. To those who have watched, listened, and reflected, the final realization is clear. You cannot control the world with virtue alone. You cannot command influence by waiting. You cannot remain safe by avoiding conflict. You cannot rely on truth without leverage, but you can regain power by seeing clearly, by acting courageously, by aligning yourself with reality rather than illusion. This is the quiet, enduring, and profoundly human power that Machiavelli sought to reveal. It is not ruthless. It is not feared. It is respected. It is chosen, and once chosen, it can never be taken lightly again.